So, because I've been, looking and, covering the stuff and the craziness and the comedy that goes on Conservative Home, obviously I know a lot of the big players. Will Atkinson tends to write for things in like The Critic and other a bit more, shall we say, far right blogs sometimes, where he's a bit more, shall we say, freer with his opinions sometimes. So maybe we should cover some of that stuff in the future. But obviously, one of the big ones was, of course, Henry Hill. Henry Hill was the former editor of Conservative Home, had been for quite a while before Charles Dilnot took over. And he, of course, was not a Kemi Badenoch supporter, you know. And he was very, very much in the Robert Jenrick camp. In fact, most of Conservative Home, at least most of like the big authors, like the regulars who would write for it, were Jenrick supporters. There were very little, shall we say, Kemi Badenoch true believers on that site. And I would also say this: some of these people, like Henry Hill, Will Atkinson, I have to generally ask them, why do you think somehow Jenrick would have been better? Because honestly, he just strikes me as the male version of Kemi Badenoch. He would be just as bad. He would just be flailing about. And here's the thing: all this whispering campaign that's going on against, Kemi Badenoch right now from the Robert Jenrick supporters. If Jenrick won, guess what? The whispering campaign against Robert Jenrick would be starting from all those Kemi Badenoch supporters. So you'd be in exactly the same place. And we know why you're not effective. It's you need policy. And Kemi Badenoch has not gone out and said, we are going to do this. In fact, your entire leadership contest was just devoid of policy. And you're like, oh, yes, we're tackling the problems. Kemi Badenoch came out a couple of days ago, we're telling hard truths. Still to this day, the Conservative Party's biggest problem is they cannot look themselves in the mirror and think what they did wrong. Because if they did, they would flinch and they would run a mile. They daren't look themselves in the mirror. They have become the Dorian Greys, ever chasing their eternal youth, terrified to look at the portrait lest they realize how horrific it is. So let's get on into this, because Henry Hill has written not in Conservative Home, but in The Guardian. And sometimes, you see these conservative writers writing, shall we say, where they can be a bit freer and a bit more opinionistic, a bit more open and honest about their conservative criticisms. So you're going to have a look at this, because he is laying in to not only Kemi Badenoch, but also the Tory party as well. So we're going to have a look and see what he said here. So before we do, though, please do remember to click on the like, share, and the subscribe button down below. There's the Patreon page. There's a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee. We can all buy me coffee. The YouTube thank you button. And, of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So, as we all know, Kemi Badenoch's leadership, it's rocky and getting rockier. Will she survive the year? Who knows? But everyone says it, the big challenge is next year. Next year is the big challenge. The May local elections, they're not looking forward to it. They already know that they're going to lose. And to put up the amount of candidates that they had, that's going to cost a lot of money. And especially when a lot of people don't realize that the Conservative Party isn't exactly in the best financial position at the moment. Something that Kemi Badenoch is desperately trying to sort out. But, of course, she hasn't got a plan for that. So, guess what? It's not working out. So, let's crack on and into this. Let's see what Henry Hill had to say. So he said with this, with the title of this, he said, "We Tories have no idea what an effective modern leader looks like. That's why we struggle to find one." So, what would be the ideal leader of the Conservative Party look like? Despite the party's newly developed regicide habit, this question doesn't receive enough serious consideration. The sitting leader naturally becomes the focus now for dissatisfaction, while speculation understandably focuses on now actual alternatives. I like that. Actual alternatives. Like, you can just tell that is like, yeah, I'm not happy with the current leader. That's very telling language, that. But he does have a point, though. That is, again, part of the problem. We've said it before. The big problem of the Conservative Party is it is just multifaceted. They're not going to solve it by, fixing one thing. This is just how broken the party is. And it all started in 2016. It all started in 2016 with Brexit and the whole Brexit psychodrama. And it started from there. But the problems were already there before. Brexit just made it a whole lot worse, and they've got themselves into the situation, and they cannot get out of it. They have to have complete, full root and branch reform of the party. And to do that, you need someone who is strong enough, who is going to take on these, certain factions within the party to do that. But no one like that is forthcoming at all. So, yeah, this is why I keep on covering the Conservatives, because it generally does look like we are witnessing a profound shift in our politics, where soon it's not going to be the Conservatives who are the largest party in the UK. So, back to this. So, on one level, he continues, that is now perfectly sensible. As a matter of practical politics, there is at least a short-term use in now dreaming of the ideal candidate, who does not at least exist. Like the serial online data with a long list of must-haves, you end up now in a place where no living candidate can even measure up to the one who lives in your head. And the one that lives in everyone's head is Margaret Thatcher. This is why a lot of the Kemi supporters are trying to invoke that she is the next Margaret Thatcher. It's not working, but there you go. There is too little to the imagination, of course, now has its own dangers. Most obvious that of now assuming that one of the candidates must offer on an offer must be the right answer, while chasing the impossible fantasy is a receipt for dying alone. Taking the plunge without a clear idea of what you are looking for will lead to a swift disillusionment, as successive Tory leaders have found out, and as Kemi Badenoch is finding out now. As the party now shows no sign yet of having put the era of rapid onset buyer's remorse behind it. I love that. Rapid onset buyer's remorse. Oof. There is already now very nervous questions about Kemi Badenoch's leadership bubbling up in the press. Unhappy Conservatives should at least put it to productive use by trying to dig beneath their unhappiness with the current leader and trying to work out what it is they actually want. And here's the thing, they all want different things. They want this free market fundamentalist leader, but who won't carry out many of these free market fundamentalist policies, but then won't do it. They want someone who is willing to do the right-wing stuff on Farage, but actually, if they went through with that, that would be very unlawful, which means a whole section of the party doesn't then want to do that. It's crazy. It's genuinely crazy what they want, what they desire, and there is no such thing ever as sort of this perfect leader that they ever want and desire. Sometimes you have to make compromises. It's the practicalities of politics, as Henry L just said. You have to sort of make compromises. Yes, he's really good at this. Wish he was better on this, but this is why you have a whole party. This is why you have a cabinet team. But there you go. So everyone will, of course, now stitch together slightly different Frankenstein's monsters when assembling their ideal leader. But most Tories will at least be raiding that very same graveyard, so to speak, drawing inspiration from the party's pantheon of past heroes. So what are they digging for? For many, the honest answer is simple: a winner. More specifically, someone who makes them feel like winners. Politics is a team sport, especially for those committed enough to join parties. Partisans chase the heights of victory no less zealously than sports fans. Again, very true. And he is right on that. And they are digging for victory. It's true. They want a winner. That's why Boris lasted so long. You know, there was constantly, if you remember the Boris years, there was things like, well, why haven't you gotten rid of him? They didn't get rid of him because the simple answer was Boris is a winner. You know, you don't understand it. It's that Johnson electoral magic. We can't lose it. If we get rid of Boris, who's going to replace him? Of course, didn't work out, did it? So back to this. This is what unites Margaret Thatcher and Boris Johnson. Notably, it allows lots of now self-styled right-wingers to pine for leaderships of a man who programmed now consisted of mass immigration and higher government spending. Both ex-leaders were praised over periods of triumph, and triumph feels good. Yep, entirely right. People who want this Boris Johnson don't realize he was for mass immigration and high levels of government spending, things that constantly conservatives say they don't want. But then why are they were so insistent on Boris Johnson? Why do they still love and defend Boris Johnson all the time? It is really weird. But again, it just goes to show you the mess, the absolute mess and state the Tory party are in. So, of course, they went about it in almost diametrically opposed ways. Johnson needed to be liked and wanted to please everyone. Thatcher, on the other hand, had a very clear vision and was prepared to take great political risks to pursue it. The second quality is too often overstated by conservatives. In our collective imagination, the 1980s can be easily devolved into a triumphant highlight reel. When modern Tories pine for our quote next Thatcher, the projection now omits not only her shortcomings, but her actual strengths. Again, very true. Margaret Thatcher is absolutely romanticized by the right wing completely. For starters, she had, and bear in mind, this is why he's going on this Thatcher comparison, because as I said at the beginning, a lot of Kemi Badenoch supporters are saying that she is the next Thatcher. This is why he's writing this and having, laying out, Thatcher's strengths and weaknesses, because soon I can guarantee you he's going to bring in Kemi Badenoch. Kemi Badenoch maybe on this, but maybe not. We'll see. So for starters, she had a clear, at least intellectual and ideological project. She gave direction to her government, something bigger than personal loyalty, and Thatcher towards the other, quote, big beasts could then work. At least for a while, it is no coincidence that they tolerated her for her tall poppies and declined now in tandem with the fortunes now of her government. Just as importantly, the Conservative Party of that era still had an instinctive understanding of its social cohesion. It is a bit vulgar to admit openly now, but back then, the Labour and the Tories were more obsessively sectional interest parties, and very well aware of it too. Again, very true on that, because they were very, very factional. Like I say, you look back at the Labour Party, what it was like back then. Tony Blair did a lot of changes too, and it brought out the party in a way that had never been really considered before. This is why big tent parties tend to win more, but can be sometimes very difficult to keep the coalitions together. Now, we'll see if Keir Starmer can actually keep this coalition together. You saw the previous one from 2019 and the previous Conservative government, that fell apart almost instantly. But will they be able to keep it together? It is a big question. So far, they seem to be able to do it, but we'll see what happens in the future. Thatcherism, he continues with, was a very explicit attempt to now change and broaden the part of the country served by, of course, the Tory interest. But it never lost the sight of who those voters actually were. And it succeeded because it made sure it looked after them. From the big bang of the city to the sale of council houses, Thatcher's governments produced very clear winners who knew who they had to thank. Again, that should certainly raise questions of, well, eventually you're going to run out of, council houses, aren't you? And eventually, yes, the big bang in the city will be great, but what about everywhere else? Those are two big criticisms. Thatcher did, unleash the big bang of the city, which was, again, very good for London, very good for the UK as GDP. But when it came to investment in other places, it failed because the Tories just got obsessed with London. And if it worked in London, well, it must work for any other city elsewhere. And that didn't work. And that has been a continuing factor of all their investment projects of this. Sale of council houses, well, we know that. There's so few council houses now because of this. That money was meant to be going back into building more council houses, but of course, of right to buy, it just got the stock just so low and low and low. And, we are in the state we are today. So there were, of course, enough of them. In fact, that John Major's 14 million votes in 1992 remains the highest popular vote shared by any party at a British general election ever. And even his now fleeting prime with a much larger electorate, Johnson couldn't even match that. Such a clarity of purpose is now visibly absent from today's Conservative Party. Yep, there is no idea or plan because the second Kemi Badenoch does one, the fights will start again. So such a clarity of purpose is very visibly absent from today's Conservative Party. From David Cameron's detoxification agenda to Johnson's cakeism. The repeated efforts to now broaden the Tory coalition have nevertheless left it at perhaps its now narrowest since the advent now of universal suffrage and in extinction territory now amongst working age voters. Yep. The more and more this happens, they are fighting for this dying, slowly, this dying vote share. This is why we said the secret contender in the Tory leadership contest was the Grim Reaper. It doesn't matter who will win. And unless the party actually, starts to target, young people and working age people, which again, it would mean having to sacrifice that voting block and do things they wouldn't like to do. This is why Kemi Badenoch has got a lot of Tories very, very worried about the triple lock. So who knows what could happen there, but that is the first she's ever come close to talking about Tory policy. But that's still got a lot of Tories very, very worried. So events such as Brexit and Partygate played a part in that. But Brexit was itself a product now of a deeper problem, trying to keep everyone happy by putting off papering over the deep, substantial political questions, rather than picking a side and having to fight for it. Cameron tried to implement austerity, for example, without making any big decisions by just cutting something from everything, by leaving a sprawling state that doesn't work for everyone. Through our time in office, again, you notice all that blame on David Cameron. Bear in mind, Cameron does bear some of that blame, but you notice where's the blame for people like May, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak? Where's their blame? Why hasn't it gone into them? Because again, Henry Hill, quite supportive of that side of the party, not David Cameron's side. So, throughout their time in office, the Tories were, of course, easily bounced by their opponents out of the sort of policies that produced very clear winners, such as flexible right to buy, or now tackling cliff edges in the tax system, while pandering to the local NIMBYs and recruiting far too many local councillors as MPs. I like that. That is his big criticism. They've just got far too many local councillors as MPs. And over-regulating childcare, destroyed by the social process by which people used to age into Tories. The Conservatives would then probably be best by letting go for the hunt of the next Thatcher. She did not, after all, win the leadership in 1975, talking about Stanley Baldwin. If not, we should at least now be understanding that what we need now is not a reheated version of a specific agenda or an aesthetic, but rather will now to radically overhaul a party and confront the deep structural problems affecting Britain. We should remember that this was, for many Tories, an extremely uncomfortable experience. Worthwhile revolutions always are. And they are not going to do that. Because who is calling for that deep structural change? Kemi Badenoch isn't. Kemi Badenoch isn't bringing that about. Henry Hill might talk about, oh, yes, we need these, we need to address like these deep structural problems in the UK and in this. But his answer is turf Kemi Badenoch out and get in Robert Jenrick, who also doesn't have a plan for solving those deep structural problems, Henry. The Conservative Party is in a mess. And until someone actually comes along and says, this is like the awful mess of our party because it is just so awful, we need complete root, branch, and stem reform of like what our policies are, what we are going to do, throws the free market fundamentalism in a bin, and maybe goes to, I don't know, dare they go and follow the example of maybe like European conservatives and go a bit more like, you know, social conservatism. I doubt they would ever dare do that or even venture onto that ground, because I'll tell you now, the Conservative Party would rip them to shreds. And like I say, civil warring and everything with the party would just kick off again. And that is in itself a problem. And we are looking at a party that I think is in a death throw. It's in a death throw, but the thing is, with a party this big, a party that's been this powerful for so long, it is not going to just end like that. This is going to be quite possibly a long, slow, and painful death of this party. And the thing is, people like Henry Hill know it. They can see some of the problems, but then they don't dare go to these conservative outlets and say, right, there's deep structural problems within our party. This is how I think we should be solving them. You know, I want to start this conversation about that. Dare they do that? No. Like, if this was Conservative Home, if Henry Hill wrote this for Conservative Home, the comments down below would be absolutely slating him. It would absolutely be slating him for daring to at least tell a bit of the truth. So, as always, let me know what you think down below, because, like I say, Kemi Badenoch's time as leader, do you think she'll be out by the end of this year? Do you think she will maybe last until next year? Who knows? But I'll tell you now, there's definitely a lot of trouble ahead for Kemi Badenoch this year. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.